Okay, let's dive right into what is absolutely a haunting literary masterpiece. Today, we're unpacking the incredibly deep, complex themes inside Han Kang's celebrated novel, Human Acts. We're going to explore the really intricate layers of victimhood, memory, and the cold mechanics of state violence. And we're doing this by walking through a fascinating explainer that imagines leading real-world scholars analyzing the book alongside the characters themselves. It is a wild concept, so let's get into it. I want to pose a pretty chilling question to you right off the bat. When does a citizen actually become an enemy of this state? It's a question that hooks you instantly, right? It immerses us directly into the dark historical context of the 1980 Gwangju Uprising in South Korea, a time when the government literally turned its own weapons on its own people. So, to figure out how a government massacres hundreds of its own citizens in just a matter of days, our source material sets up this incredibly unique premise. Picture this. We are placed in an ethereal, impossible roundtable. It's an imaginary archive set in a shadowy, candlelit gymnasium beneath Gwangju's former provincial hall. And in this space, real-world scholars and the novel's tragic characters sit side by side to hash out the unimaginable things that happened right there in that very room. Gathered at this supernatural symposium, we've got heavy-hitting academics like Michael Rothberg and Judith Butler. And they're joined by the characters, Dong-ho, the 15-year-old victim, his fiercely grieving mother, Jin-soo, a tortured survivor, and Un-suk, a victim of state censorship. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how Judith Butler's theory of mournable lives frames the very beginning of this tragedy. The idea is that political language determines which lives get protection and which deaths are publicly grieved. Basically, the scholars argue that before the soldiers even fired a single shot, the state had already stripped these victims of their humanity just by officially labeling the students and citizens as agitators and threats. Topic 1. Why did you stay? This brings us to a truly heartbreaking confrontation between the murdered 15-year-old boy, Dong-ho, and his mother. Right in the center of their dialogue is a devastating visual symbol. It's a pair of oversized white school shoes just sitting on the table. His mother bought them a week before he died, telling him, he'd grow into them. These unworn shoes perfectly represent the innocent future that Dong-ho never got to live. Just listen to his mother's words for a second. I have spent 30 years looking for you in crowds, at bus stops, outside schools. It's just a profound expression of a mother's endless, agonizing search. She's retroactively bargaining with a history that's already been brutally written. She just cannot accept that her boy didn't come home. And this brings up a massive, almost jarring contrast in how we process tragedy. On one hand, you have the macro scale, the cold, calculating bureaucracy of state violence, military statements, erased records. But then, on the other hand, you have the micro, the devastatingly small, ordinary details, an unfinished bowl of radish soup, a kitchen apron. As the mother tells the scholars, everyone kept giving her history, but honestly, she just wanted an ordinary Tuesday. So the crucial point is how she directs her grief. She confronts Dong-ho's friend, Jung-dae, who was shot in the street, saying, "I knew why men with guns killed children. I am asking why my son believed your death required his." She places the blame for Dong-ho's tragic choice to stay in that gymnasium on his innocent, misguided sense of friendship. I mean, think about how profoundly sad that is. He stayed simply because he didn't want to abandon the dead. Moving on to topic 2, is survival a punishment? The symposium pivots to Jin-soo, the survivor, and we really start exploring the terrifying paradox of outliving a massacre. Because as we see, surviving the event definitely did not mean escaping it. Look at the contrast. You have Dong-ho, the victim, frozen forever in time at age 15, totally preserved and youthful innocence. And then you have Jin-soo, the survivor, who is just accumulating these heavy, empty years, completely imprisoned internally by his memories. Jin-soo actually admits that there were mornings he woke up and envied the dead boy. 9. That is the agonizingly short number of years Jin-soo carried his survivor's guilt after his release from prison, before he ultimately took his own life. How does a survivor reach that breaking point? Well, scholars like Elaine Scarry and Kathy Carruth map this out for us perfectly. They show how trauma progressively invaded every single ordinary aspect of Jin-soo's life. First, it was the literal prison cell, enduring torture. Then, the release, only to find that freedom was really just a larger, country-sized cell. Next, something as mundane as a crowded bus where a stranger's casual breath triggered absolute sheer panic. And finally, the tragic rejection, where he became totally unable to even receive his own mother's kind touch, all because his body just no longer recognized what safety felt like. This absolute theft of joy is captured so viscerally in a fleeting memory about a watermelon, Jinsu recalls. Juice ran down my wrist. The sun was warm. For several minutes, I did not think of prison. Then I felt ashamed. Even the most innocent, brief moments of joy, like eating watermelon by a river, became torturous betrayals. He literally felt like he was stealing time from those who died. But here is where this ethereal setup does something incredible. The dead actually get to speak back. Jongdae, the friend who died in the street, offers this powerful synthesis to Jinsu. If I tell you that the dead never blamed you, will you finally stop punishing yourselves? It just completely breaks down the entire philosophical argument of survivor's guilt. The dead never ever wanted the living to owe them their suffering. And this leads to the massive emotional climax of our explainer. In an incredible act of grace, Dongho's mother takes those oversized white school shoes and places them carefully in Jinsu's lap. She tells him to stop believing that his feet stole her son's road. In that moment, she relieves him of the crushing burden he was never, ever meant to carry. Well, okay, let's take a collective breath for a second. While this has been intensely moving, this ethereal roundtable has barely even scratched the surface. We've only just covered the introduction and topics 1 and 2. There is so much more to uncover. To read the rest, please visit imaginarytalks.com/HanKong, Human Acts Explained by Leading Scholars/right now. Over there, you can dive into topics 3, 4, and 5 and explore profound final thoughts on who truly owns Survivor's story. I'm going to leave you with this one last, super provocative thought from another survivor, Seonju, right before topic 3 begins. When does remembering a survivor become another way of using them? It is quite the cliffhanger, and it challenges everything we think we know about history, trauma, and storytelling. Head over to the link to find out how the scholars answer it. Thanks for learning with me today, and keep asking the big questions.